Hello and welcome everybody to the Plastic Recycling Update. We have a very special guest today, Howard. Howard, maybe perhaps you can introduce yourself to our listeners, and then that way they can get a very good feel of who you are, what you do, and the interesting things we have to chat about today.
Well, thank you. And also thank you for inviting me to participate in the podcast. Just a brief introduction. I'll be as brief as I can. I'm a 40-year plus veteran of the plastics industry in the U.S. And to boil it all down to a few comments, the first 20 years of my career I spent as an executive within the plastics producer ranks and worked for several major chemical companies who produced products like polyethylene, polypropylene, polystyrene, et cetera. And so worked in that environment for 20 years. And then following that, I joined a consulting firm in Houston, Texas, who specialized in the petrochemicals and plastics markets. Used to be called CMAI, and then evolved into IHS, and now is part of the Dow Jones Group, Opus Dow Jones, and known as Chemical Market Associates. And I was their global business leader, practice leader for plastics, ran their plastics practice for over a dozen years. So recent years, I've been in, I started consulting, and most recently, the last 2 years, I've been working with a company called StoneX. And StoneX is a global financial services company, heavily involved in various commodities. And they're adding plastics to their portfolio of commodities that they offer trading and risk mitigation and so forth. So that's my current position as senior advisor on plastics to StoneX.
So needless to say, you have a little bit of experience in plastic, just a tiny bit.
As you can see, this used to be much darker years ago, like the color of your hair.
Awesome. So I think obviously the main purpose of today's podcast is to dive deep into what impacts resin pricing. What I like to understand and help our viewers understand is what are the things that impact pricing to move sometimes on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis, where they're going, etc., with a particular focus on recycled plastics. And obviously, we're going to tackle that from a North American lens, of which you are an expert. So maybe we can start kind of diving into what is the current state of recycled plastics? What are the key factors driving pricing? And then kind of where do you see it moving in 2023?
Sure. And that's it's a big question,
it is.
and I'm going to try and give you a concise answer as best we can.
Perfect. Yeah.
Well, first of all, to delineate between virgin and recycled, there are some areas where there is crossover influences for sure.
Yes.
But then there are other areas where there isn't, there is no relationship. And so, you have to look at the two products, markets, or environments, somewhat separately. There's also regional elements and other things. I'll start with a kind of a little colorful story that I used to tell. If somebody would always ask, what are the main influences on plastics pricing? And, there was always that eagerness to find that magic formula, crude oil, natural gas, plus or minus XYZ, and you come up with a plastics price.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, over the years, it's just never that simple. And the same applies in recycle, for virgin and recycle.
Of course.
And I remember putting together an acronym years ago, and I'll call it the Forrest Gump acronym. And let me just run through this very quickly for you, going with the letters of Forrest Gump. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
F, feedstocks and energy prices. very influential on cash costs
Yes.
for virgin, which again cascades into recycle. O for operating rates, plant manufacturing plant operating rates, and how are the facilities and manufacturing sites operating that produce these raw materials. First R is recession. Second R, recovery. So in other words, the economic environment has a big influence. E for environmental issues, very strong element in recycle. S, shifts in inventory. Inventory levels high, inventories low, at the supplier level or at the buyer level. All those influence market dynamics. And then T for trade. Imports, exports of raw materials and finished and semi-finished goods. And getting into the Gump area, G for geopolitical environment, very influential, particularly in recycle because of the mandates, law changes, and so forth. U, unforeseen events. You could have a fire, an outage, a storm, or some of these things that impact the supply chain and can impact prices. And then there's M, monetary policy. Is the currency weak or strong, and how does that influence the commodity pricing? And finally, P is plastics competition with other materials, paper, metal, glass, and so on and so on. So all of these things can have an impact on both virgin and recycle. Now, getting back to your original question, where are we at? Where are we heading? Certainly, there's no doubt that consumption and demand for recycled products is in a growth mode, and has been for the last few years. There's no question about that. And we see that continuing. There's no reason for it not to continue as companies are trying to incorporate more recycled product into their packaging and finished goods, and government agencies and entities that control standards and so forth, are trying to push for higher recycled content in products. So volumes and consumption rates are going to be growing, and it does speak to a kind of an escalating price environment because the supply-demand balance is still, I'll call it, evolving. We're in a growth mode. It's a relatively young industry, and there are a number of challenges, to try and balance that supply-demand equation, particularly in recycle, because there's so many formats that recycle presents itself. So just a quick note. So what are some of the differences between the virgin market considerations and the recycle? Well, you take that whole Forrest Gump example, but add to that some additional areas, okay? And I jotted down a quick list. The questions: is it flake? Is it pelletized? Is it baled product or something that's not not in a finished format yet? Is it natural color? Is it mixed color? Is it FDA? Is it appropriate for food contact or not appropriate for food contact? Also, location is so important because freight is an extremely important element, or cost element, when you're trying to put together a rolled up cost and a consumer price for the product. Government rules, regulations, and mandates, and so forth. Almost every municipality, town, city, state, country, province, has got their own set of rules and regulations on what is recycled and what's not recycled, and how much should be incorporated into finished products. And companies have set their own standards in this area as well. So the fabricator converter who's making a finished product has to also consider, what is my customer asking me for, and then some other interesting things from a technology standpoint today. Is it mechanically recycled? Is it chemically recycled? And so on and so on. So these are a whole nother list of categories of dynamics, which can influence price, for the recycled product. So anyway, hopefully I addressed, that's a lot, but I hope that I've addressed the initial question you asked.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's a lot to unpack, right? Unpack Forrest Gump and his chocolates. So let's kind of dive a little bit deeper into this. You mentioned a number of factors, 10, 11 factors, if we count the double R. Where do you see, and I know you mentioned formulas are very difficult, right? There may be a trend line, there may be some factors that have heavier weighting on that notion that you have of Forrest Gump. Help us to understand what are the big factors in there. What are some of the seasonal factors? If we're talking about unforeseen events, are there some seasons, for example, where you have more natural disasters in the Texas area, etc.? How about seasonality? Are there times when prices are higher, times when prices are lower? Let's kind of go a little bit deeper into one, what are the big factors? And then two, what are the predictable factors that are easy to understand and get a hold of?
It's interesting too. Let's start with the basic building blocks here. First of all, from an energy standpoint, which kind of sets a base, a foundation for all these, most of these products, much of the volume produced is still reliant on, crude oil, natural gas starting points in terms of production. And that's, you're correct, that there's a region of, in the US in particular, the Texas, Louisiana Gulf Coast, where all of the refining and gas processing, which is the precursors to petrochemical and plastics production, all that's going on down there, predominantly in Texas and Louisiana. And yeah, we've actually had in recent history a number of disruptive events. If you go back to February of 2001, for example, the big freeze, temperatures were well below freezing for hours and hours, days, and these plants are built out in the open, not like, if you go to some of the Canadian petrochemical and refining operations out there and, out there in Western Canada, hey, the everything is insulated and jacketed and there's steam on everything. And they know how to keep things warm in the wintertime. But down in Texas, if the temperature drops below freezing for any extended period of time, it's very disruptive. So, we had a major shutdown of most of the facilities during early 2021 during the big freeze. We had a miniature event here, a mini event in December, again in Texas, just this past December, and that had some disruptive effects on the operations. And in fact, now, just the other day, there was tornadoes in the Houston area. I lived in Houston for over 20 years and very familiar with the weather gyrations, and some of those impacted the production facilities. And there's some force majeure announcements as a result for things like polyethylene, polypropylene. And so those have a ripple effect, across the entire spectrum, and can influence and impact recycle and virgin for sure, but recycle ultimately, can feel the ripple effect. And it's not just the production of those products, but it's also getting the power. Sometimes there's power disruptions. They may have a lightning strike at the plant. Severe rain, there can be flooding, which disrupts the transportation of the raw materials. Sometimes you can't even get the people in there. If there's a significant weather event, the people that run the operation can't get there, so you have to shut down for those reasons. So many things like that can impact on the baseline production on the virgin side. So then you have to, and so the seasonality also, when you're looking across the spectrum of resins, certainly if you're looking at, say, PET, there's a season there, where you have soft drinks and and water bottles, and the barbecue and picnic season. The people are going on vacations in the summer, spring, and summertime, and things like this. So there's more consumption there, and so bottle usage goes up, and obviously there's going to be more availability of disposed of PET bottles, for example. Also, you have to look at the seasonality on the energy side. Crude oil and natural gas. Natural gas is still used predominantly in North America for home heating, and electricity generation. So you're going to have an ebb and flow of natural gas prices throughout the year, and they were very high last year. Natural gas prices historically high, and they've been coming down, quite a bit now, and they're down to more normal levels that we've recently seen in the $2-3 per million BTU. But anything can impact that, and you can have a spike, in either oil or natural gas. And yes, those ripple through the whole system, and can ultimately, there may be a lag time between the time you see one of those events and recycle pricing react, but you should be cognizant of what's impacting the supply chain and keep an eye on those dynamics, I guess, as you're making your plans and looking at your supply chain and your portfolio of products that you're bringing into your operation. I guess more specifically in terms of recycle. The other thing is you've got to look at the industry, and we mentioned earlier, that it's a growth industry. There are growing pains, and you're going to have this disconnect between supply and demand requirements. So you have to look at companies that you're going to be working with. Who can you rely on as a partner for someone that you can count on for continuous supply? That's not going to be kind of a fair weather supplier that's going to come in when they have a little something, and you don't hear you'll hear crickets if if they don't have anything available. So that's an important element, is who you're going to partner with and do business with. That and you may have to diversify your supplier portfolio. You may have to rely on multiple suppliers in this area, who may have different products they focus on, or different regions, and may have, and there's different technologies, being employed as well, and what works best for your manufacturing operation too, because not all end products are the same either. The level of cleanliness and the level of consistency, of the product, flake to flake, pellet to pellet, and how it runs in your operation, and do you get are you getting the desired raw material, finished product characteristics that you need, for your end product? All of those things are certainly come into play when you're deciding on how to run your operations at this point.
Howard, have you seen any correlations between virgin pricing and recycled pricing across thermoplastics, across PET?
There's touch points. I guess the way I would describe it is that it's not as consistent. I would say that anybody, if in fact, StoneX, as a commodities focused company that offers trading and risk mitigation, you're always looking at doing the statistics and trying to get an R squared, and how prices track, with various indices, and is there a reliable index that will the prices will track, with a 95% confidence, result, and so forth. Well, unfortunately, at this point, you could look at any individual resin, and first you have to look, what's the level of recycle percentage going on? How's the collection? How's the processing? And and what percentage of that of the total is there? And how consistent is the stream, and so forth? And PET obviously is one of the most widely recycled resins, and probably has a higher level of reliability in terms of a correlation, with virgin and some of those dynamics. And then probably next below that might be high density polyethylene, and you go down the list. But each resin is going to have its own characteristics and correlation relationships, with those same elements that are impacting virgin. PET's probably got, I couldn't come up with a number right offhand here, but it probably has the highest level of correlation, I would say, at this point.
Is that because the ease of interchangeability in terms of the fewer grades available on PET versus PE? Is that because of the legislative environment where it's patchy and there's legislation in some states where there's not in others, and then it's just a question of, is recycled cheaper than virgin? What drives that?
Um, Almost everything you just said, at different times, and I think
Right.
that's the conundrum, for the marketplace is,
Mm.
at any given point in time, you can point to one of those major factors,
Mm.
uh, and it changes,
Mhm.
from time to time. And as a buyer, you may sit there and go, nah, they're just telling me, yeah, I'm getting a story, here's this
Mhm.
month's story, and
Mhm.
here's next month's story, but in reality, at this point, in the evolution of the industry, and until a lot of these many issues and dynamics, get smoothed out a little bit more, and you get more critical mass, to the overall marketplace. You're just going to have these variations and these elements that are impacting price on any given day. It really comes down to that same issue I mentioned earlier. Is there that magic formula? You take say you take PET bottles, virgin resin, and you have XYZ formula, and you
Mhm.
come up with a recycled price.
Mhm.
Well, I wish it was that simple, but
Mhm.
unfortunately, there's so many influences and dynamics going on. You just
Mhm.
can't get there yet.
Right. Right.
So, but because PET, for example, is one of the highest volume recycled products and has a
Mhm.
very consistent stream coming
Mhm.
from products that are, you've got the fiber business and you've got the bottle business,
Mhm.
the big
Mhm.
slices. But
Mhm.
yeah, there's a big stream of bottle grade PET that flows through the marketplace, and
Mhm.
it's a consistent, more consistent than some of the other products.
Right. Howard, if you were a buyer and you were to try and make a decision on, I see pricing of PET, for example, is at this level. Do I buy just enough for the next week or the next month? Do I purchase additional spot to kind of supplement the contracts that I already have because pricing, it seems like, is lower? What kind of strategy should a buyer have when tackling or kind of getting a sense of what to buy, how to buy, when to buy? Rather not what to buy and how to buy, but when to buy, probably.
Yeah. I I think at this point, as a buyer, first of all, I guess you have to look at your company in terms of what's your company strategy, what
Mm-hmm.
kind of resources do you have at your
Mm-hmm.
at your disposal,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and, uh, and how flexible can you be?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think flexibility today is really important in this
Sure.
market because of the
Mm-hmm.
variability.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing I would say is try to have realistic expectations.
Mm-hmm.
um, that there, it's not a matter of if there's going to be an issue, whether it's a supply chain issue, a quality issue, or a price issue. It's not if, it's just when. Something's going to
Yeah.
happen to disrupt
Yeah.
your, the flow of your business, or the costs, and so you have to just expect that,
Yes.
and so have realistic expectations to start with,
Yeah.
and then try to determine, how much inventory. Yeah, inventory, it has become has become a challenging, issue over the years for many
Yeah.
companies. And we've
Yeah.
had a trend, in many businesses of reducing inventories down to the absolute minimum,
Of
an
course.
absolute minimum level, because,
Yeah.
companies got spoiled and they were used to just-in-time deliveries, and, you could get it on a whim, and quick deliveries and
Yes.
uh, and and supply chains that were working, and that's not the case today. There's a lot more variability in your supply chain, and so you have to be prepared for extended delivery times or availability issues and so on. So yeah, if you can financially tolerate a little bit more inventory of certain products that are essential for you, yeah, keep some inventory, if you can
Mm.
financially, if it makes sense. And as I said before, you may have to also cultivate multiple suppliers.
Mhm.
It's just the nature of the market is today that try to qualify numerous suppliers, as many as you can, so that you have approved products from multiple sources. And I think many professional procurement and purchasing people. I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know, but you have to have multiple suppliers that you can feel comfortable that you can go get their product that's qualified. And then, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say also, uh, examine potential risk mitigation opportunities. That's actually why I'm doing what I'm doing with StoneX today, because there's more and more opportunities out there we're finding for people in the plastics sector who've never really even entertained doing some kind of hedge or risk mitigation strategy on their raw materials or some of their inputs into their operation. Plastics has always been a very difficult and challenging environment to do that. And what we're finding is that there are potential opportunities for that as well. So if your company is interested in that sort of thing, you can also explore, how could I protect myself potentially, or create a little bit more of a cushion for my be able to budget or plan from a financial standpoint in over the years coming up. I'm doing my strategy and planning and budgeting for the coming year. Maybe there are elements of the supply chain that I can do some hedging or risk mitigation with, and kind of lock in kind of a known return, for that piece of my business for a period of time. So that's another
Yeah.
another potential element.
Are you hedging only prime? Are you hedging recycled materials? Help
Right
us
now,
understand.
yeah, right now the program is relatively new.
Mhm.
But StoneX is offering contracts in polyethylene and polypropylene, and
Mhm.
today it's prime. PET is on our radar screen. We're doing a lot of work to try and include an option for PET because it's
Mhm.
a very highly requested material in addition to
Mhm.
polyethylene, polypropylene.
Mhm.
And we are looking at recycle, and we're in the midst of doing all that analysis that I talked about. We're trying to do
Wonderful.
correlations. It's trickier, it's more challenging on the recycle side because of all the added uh, dynamics, that influence that market. So there's so
Yes.
many more things to look at. So it's taking a little time, but right
Yes.
now, polyethylene, polypropylene, we have opportunities there. PET is on the radar coming up, and yeah, recycle. We're talking about that and doing some analysis right now in that area.
That's wonderful. But I think maybe over a decade ago, the London Metal Exchange used to
Yes,
provide some
yes,
hedging
yeah.
on, I think it was only polyethylene and polypropylene, but then they shut it down. I'm not sure exactly why, but it's interesting to see that come back given the scale of just polyethylene, polypropylene is pretty massive, just
I've
in the US.
having been around as long as I have, I've seen iterations of attempts, to get in
Yes.
at doing this kind of work. And yes, I remember the London Metals Exchange, and they actually had ring trading, on the floor of the exchange there in London, and I got to
Yeah.
witness that actually. It was fascinating, but it's all a matter of the timing, the liquidity out there, are companies open to doing this, and how is it complex? Is it simple? Do you have the financial resources, and the, is management open to doing those kind of things? And what we're finding is that the environment, is today, there's more tools available. People are more open to looking at these things than they were in the past. In the old days, it was like, when the price goes down, I buy more, and when the price goes up, I use my inventory, and so on. I'm not interested in that sort of thing. And a lot of that mentality has transitioned over the last several years, and people look at their businesses with more sophistication, and have better tools, to be able to do these things. So.
Yeah. Wonderful. I think last question for you, Howard, is where can our audience find you? How can we connect with you?
Thank you for that. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. And by the way, every week I do a video update on the U.S. market, kind of talk about some of the general virgin pricing issues for mostly polyethylene, polypropylene, but and some of the driving issues that are going on, week to week. So every Tuesday I post a video. I'm on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter. It's HRAP_plasticsX. So you can find me there. And email address is howard.rappaport@stonex.com.
Great. Howard, thank you so much for a very interesting conversation and some easy to remember tidbits with Forrest Gump for sure. Look, we'd love to have you back as you flesh out hedging for recycled materials and as you dive deeper into that space of the market. But it's been lovely talking to you, and I look forward to having you on again.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on. Cheers.
Take care. Bye.